Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Our program will begin in just a moment. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Our program will begin in just a moment. Good day. Welcome to Advocacy Anywhere, powered by American Jewish Committee. Advocacy Anywhere is AJC's digital platform that enables you to engage with AJC's global expertise, content, and advocacy from wherever you are. Between 1941 and 1943, the Nazis shot between 70 and 100,000 people at Babi Yar, including almost the entire Jewish population of Kiev. Today, on the eve of the Operation Barbarossa anniversary, the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union, we are joined by legendary human rights activist and Soviet Refusenik Natan Sharansky for a timely discussion with AJC CEO David Harris on this important and lesser-known chapter in World War II history. Following their conversation, we will hear from Babi Yar Holocaust Memorial Center Deputy CEO Ruslan Kavatsiuk for a special presentation on the establishment of the first modern Holocaust museum in Eastern Europe. After we hear from our guests, time permitting, we will take your questions. You may email your question to questions@ajc.org, questions is plural, or use the Q&A feature in Zoom. David, the floor is yours.
Claire, thank you, and hello to everyone on the call. Natan Sharansky is someone that I have known about for many years. He's been a personal hero of mine, an iconic figure in the Jewish world. And I urge all of you who may not have read all of Natan's books to do so. And if I may urge you to begin by reading Fear No Evil, his prison memoir, which I have read and reread countless times. It's an extraordinary story about an extraordinary man. And so for me, there's a very personal pleasure in having this opportunity to speak with Natan, even though the subject matter of Babi Yar is anything but pleasurable. Natan, welcome.
Thank you, David. And you, David, for me, with many positions which you did, you're always the organizer of the great historic demonstration on Washington, which was in fact the final battle for the struggle for Soviet Jewry. And well, thank you for all you did for our people.
And together we won.
Yeah, exactly.
At great cost, we won. So Natan, you and I were born within a year of each other. Both of our families were directly touched by the war. But let's go back to June 22nd, 1941. 80 years ago, Operation Barbarossa. The Germans attacked the Soviet Union. You and I were born shortly after the war. What happened to your family as a result of Operation Barbarossa?
Well, historically, as it's known, it was full surprise for Stalin, who thought that he duped everybody, and Hitler by signing agreement, by dividing Europe, by occupying parts of Poland and Baltic republics and so on. And now he will be the first when he will be ready to attack Hitler. But then it was Hitler who was the first to attack Stalin. And I think not only Stalin, all the Soviet people were shocked. They grew believing that the Soviet army is the strongest army in the world, and they have reliable now partner. Stalin is very wise, and he turned Hitler into partner, and nobody expected really. Further, the Germans will start this Operation Barbarossa, and that so quickly, practically without any resistance. All the Soviet weapons happened to be like toys against the army of the tanks and the airplanes of Hitler. And very quickly, Hitler's army reached the places which were full of Jews. That was the center of Jewish life, in fact, in the world. Poland and Ukraine and the Baltics, they're from almost everybody who is Ashkenazi Jew. He can, the second or the third generation, they are from these places. And these places crowded with Jews, and Hitler started systematic killing. Our family, my father volunteered to the Red Army, and for 4.5 years was in the army. My mother was evacuated from Donetsk together with the plot. All the plot where she worked was moved to Uzbekistan, and she was one of those. But nobody evacuated Jews. There was no planning of evacuation of Jews. As a result, a lot of my relatives and friends of my relatives in Odessa, in Donetsk, in Kiev, in Kharkov, in Dnipropetrovsk were killed in Babi Yars, in the suburbs of these cities and these shtetls.
So I want to be sure our audience understands, Natan himself, his family is from Ukraine.
Yeah.
Kiev is the largest city in Ukraine, and Babi Yar was a ravine on the outskirts, on the edge of the city of Kiev.
Yeah.
Natan, in the Soviet period, when did you first hear the name Babi Yar?
Well,
Do you remember?
well, that is really a very important question, because Babi Yar is at the same time the symbol of Holocaust, the biggest massive grave of the Holocaust, 100,000 people killed there, 33,000 in a day and a half killed. So it is the biggest massive grave, and it's a symbol of those 1.5 million Jews who were killed in Eastern Europe, practically in their homes. On the other hand, at the same time, Babi Yar is the symbol of another crime, of the crime of Soviet Union, which tried to erase the memory of the Holocaust. I was born 3 years after the war, 1948. I was playing in the killing fields. Well, all my childhood was between Donetsk, Kiev, Kharkov, Dnipropetrovsk, Odessa. Every place was full of killed Jews. And we knew nothing about Holocaust. We knew about the great victory of Soviet Union. We were playing games, the Red Army against Nazi Army, but we knew nothing about Holocaust. But they were like whispers. It was known that there was a lot of Jews killed, and there is such a place, Babi Yar. And suddenly, one day in 1961, for one day, it seems that it is possible to speak about it. Yevgeny Aftershenko, the Soviet poet, publishes the poem that how it is that there is no monument in this place, which is symbol of the persecution of Jews and speaks about persecution of Jews. And I was 13 years old. We were so glad that finally you can speak loudly. It was one day. Next day they started campaign against. He was condemned. It was made clear that Soviet Union, there is no anti-Semitism. And when then finally there was a monument in Babi Yar built by Soviet Union, there was no mentioning of Jews. It was not supposed to know that people who were killed there, they were Jews. That was the policy of Soviet Union, to raise the memory of Holocaust in order to undermine, to weaken the identity of Soviet Jews.
Did you ever have a chance later on to meet Yevgeny Aftershenko and to speak to him about what motivated him to write his now famous poem?
Yeah, well, not only, I had also pleasure of receiving him in Israel, and one day he was on Shabbat evening in my house, of course, many years after this, and all our battles were behind us and Soviet Union didn't exist. But I told him then, and I had the opportunity to speak with him before, that everything what is connected to the history of Jewish people remains forever. So you as the poet can be sure that even in hundreds of years, there will be memory about this poem Babi Yar, because what you really did, you broke this wall of silence, and Jews will always remember. That I wanted to think so, and I knew that he was glad to hear it. But I do hope that we restoring the memory about Holocaust and now making big effort. I'm very proud to be the chairman of all the international board of this project of building the museum in Babi Yar, but restoring the memory about Holocaust. We also have to remember those who were saving Jews and those who were saving memory about Jews.
Well, I want to be sure our audience understands Yevgeny Aftershenko was not Jewish.
No, it was a young Russian poet who was playing with dissent. He wasn't really dissident, but he was like he tried to challenge also authorities, but he was brought to Babi Yar and he was told the history, and he became bewildered how it can be that so many years after there is no mention. See, so many people were killed here and there is nothing. It's like a waste land.
Right, and I want to add for our audience that the role of a poet in the Soviet Union was not the role of a poet, for example, in the United States.
Yeah.
And Yevtushenko overnight became suddenly extremely well known. I think the poem was originally published in Novi Mir. So there was a brief period where this could be discussed. And there was one other cultural figure, Natan, and I wonder if you encountered him as well. And that was the composer Dimitry Shostakovic. Because Shostakovic wrote his 13th symphony, which he subtitled In Memory of Babi Yar, again in 1962, during the Soviet era, when, as you say, the Soviets were trying to erase Holocaust memory. Did you ever have a chance to meet Shostakovich?
Yeah. Well, I didn't meet Shostakovich when I was released. He wasn't already in life, but I met his son, and we were discussing it. I have to say that in Soviet Union, of course, there was very tough censorship. The Soviet Union wanted to control everything what people can read and can say. But censorship of the literature was more tough than the censorship on the theater. And censorship of the theater was more tough than censorship of the music. Simply it is more difficult to control their every sound. And soon after, Yevgeny Aftershenko wrote the poem Babi Yar, which in fact was abolished almost immediately. He wrote symphony Babi Yar, where also the words of Aftershenko poem were included into it. And it was very powerful, and it was played only once. Then it was prohibited. So what the authorities didn't realize, the music is something different. They didn't even realize how powerful it can be. So there was one play of this symphony. It was a big event, and then it was prohibited. Next time it was only when Soviet Union fell apart.
So, Natan, you said that the monument the Soviets built did not mention Jews. In fact, I saw that monument in the Soviet era. And if I remember the Russian words on the monument, it was written Zhortvam Fashistov.
Yeah.
Fascists.
Yeah.
Their Jewish identity was erased. And again, I think it's very important for our audience, many of whom had no experience with the Soviet era, to understand why would the Soviets who opposed the Nazis at the same time try and erase the memory of the crimes committed by the Nazis against the Jews? Help our audience understand that a little bit better.
Well, there were two reasons. First reason, you have to understand, so here Soviet army is fighting against Nazis, and my father was one of millions of soldiers who went from Caucasus to Vienna and Budapest. And they are liberating the cities, and they immediately go to unmask the crimes of Hitler and to catch those who were collaborating with Hitler. And in my native city of Donetsk, then it was Stalino, which today is the center of war between Russia and Ukraine. But then there was nobody could even imagine about it. And here there was a shurf, the mine, deep mine, where 75,000 people, Jews, were thrown and killed, and they unmask it, and everybody is in shock, and they're organizing the trial over those who collaborated with Nazis, and we are here in the 44. In 1945, there was prepared a big book about before the end of the war by Ehrenburg and Grossman about the crimes of Hitler against Jews. And this book has already to be published, and suddenly it is stopped. It is prohibited because Stalin changed the policy. Stalin decided that his next target will be Jews. And what he's doing, and he's all those Jews who were the members of anti-Nazi committee collecting money from world Jewry for Soviet Union to help in the war. They were famous actors and famous writers. They were all arrested and killed. The Soviet Jewish institutions were closed. Stalin started systematic campaign against Jewish people. Now, in addition to, let's say, his deep anti-Semitism, what was important, Soviet Union tried to turn all the Soviet citizens into the very loyal citizens. And for this, to raise loyalty to religion, loyalty to nation. What Stalin found out, even very powerful during the war and after the war, how strong is the solidarity of Jewish people with the Jews in the Soviet Union. And the creation of Israel, which he himself in the beginning thought that it was great against Britain and so on, he found out that it's become the cause of loyalty of Soviets, reminding them that they're Jewish. So the policy was to fight against Jewish identity in all forms. All the Jewish poets were killed, all the Jewish theater was closed. There was campaign against Jews who were poisoning our leaders and prepared big trials. And part of this campaign was that it is Soviet Union who was fighting with Hitler, and all the glories to the Soviet Union. As to Holocaust, it was almost non-existent because nothing what strengthens the feeling of uniqueness of Jews, everything should be raised, including the Jewish memory. So that was the policy of the Soviet Union. And as a result, it's successful. I have to say, even in 1975, when I'm Jewish activist, and I go on the anniversary of Babi Yar, I try to go from Moscow to Kiev in order to have the ceremony. I, together with dozens of other Jewish activists, I'm arrested because Soviet Union doesn't permit any, not celebration, but any
commemoration. So just for the idea of commemorating Babi Yar, you were arrested.
Yeah, well, for the idea to participate in it, because it is not part of the Soviet life. It is not part of the Soviet Jewish memory life. And that's why how it happened that I grew among these killing fields of Holocaust and knew nothing about it. And Babi Yar, even knowledge about Babi Yar, or publishing books about Babi Yar was kind of dissident underground activity.
I could speak to you for an hour or hours.
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah.
I'm just getting warmed up. But let me ask you just one more question, because we're going to transition then to Ruslan and talk about the plans for the memorial. But memorializing Babi Yar has not been a simple proposition. It's been a long story for several decades.
Yeah.
And there have been issues both with regard to what role did Ukrainian locals play vis-a-vis the murder of Jews, and how is that being treated? And there have also been some fights inside the Jewish world as to who gets to memorialize and who gets to tell the story. What can you tell us about those tensions, and have they been overcome with this new project?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say, when just because of this history and because of the symbolism of Babi Yar, also for me personally, as the symbol of Holocaust, which is less known, Holocaust by bullets, 1.5 million people who were killed straight in the first days after the occupation is much less known than Auschwitz.
And the camps, yeah.
The camps. And because of this history of erasing of the memory of the Soviet Union, for me, it was a very powerful symbol. So when 5 years ago, I'm the head of Jewish agency, mayor of Kiev, together with some outstanding philanthropists, is coming to me and say that we are now going to have such a project. I was excited. I understand that's the project which can have a real power. And because it was clear that we will need a lot of international support. Was created the international board, at the time the chairman, some very important figures, the former president of Poland, the former foreign minister of Germany, and many other outstanding leaders are members. But of course, it was clear that as in Poland, as in Lithuania, as in many other places, there will be difficulty because there will be people who will be against speaking about collaboration. Of course, Hitler could never collect 33,000 Jews from all Kiev and bring them to kill them if there was no cooperation from the local people. But at the same time, in Ukraine, there are more than 2,000 families, Ukrainian families, who were saving Jews. So it all has to be brought together. But then the question immediately starts, maybe the Ukrainian government should control it. And yes, there were forces, and there still are, who are saying, who said that it must be done by some private organization, even if it is noble people who have noble aims. We, Ukrainian government, have to control it. I have to say it was quite a difficult work. I had to speak a number of times in Ukrainian parliament and other places, explaining that such projects never can succeed if they are part of the government. Even in Israel, Yad Vashem is not part of the government. In America, Washington Holocaust Museum is not part of the government. Government can and should have its representatives, should be involved in making decisions, but not control it. And that was first. And second, which there were voices that you cannot understand the history of Holocaust without understanding that Ukraine was occupied by Soviet Union, and as a result, some cooperation with Nazis was the result of the anger against Soviet Union. That's why let us put Stalin's crimes against Ukrainian people and Nazi crimes against Jews together in one museum. Let's have Holodomor and Holocaust together. And again, I had to speak a lot about it, that, look, of course, I'm against crimes of communists, and communist ideologies should be unmasked, but how can experience with Holocaust help in it? And of course, I'm against the crimes of Hitler, and they were unmasked, we should continue to unmask them, but how can crimes of Stalin help us with this? These are two separate issues which have to be studied. In addition to all this, there was another difficulty, and there is that in the meantime, Russia started fighting Ukraine, and some of the big donors to this project are at least originally from Russia, even if today they live in London. And of course, there are voices, it's all Russian provocation. Russia wants to accuse us in cooperating with Hitler. So yes, well, we have good answers, and those who want to hear us, they can, they got these answers. I'm very glad that now we are on the stage of close cooperation with the Ukrainian president. On Zoom, I had already, I think, 3 or 4 meetings with the Ukrainian president specifically about it. But still, like in every other country where the past of Holocaust is a difficult one, of course, there are different voices, there are different debates, but in the end, it's not only important for Jews, it's also important for Ukraine, establishing its place among free democratic people to look into its past, and that we have frankly to discuss its past as it is, with all these bad moments and with all very important and very good moments.
The project is blessed to have you as the chair for all the reasons that you've now discussed as well. Much as I'd like to continue, Claire, I turn it back to you for the second part of this program. Thank you, Natan.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'd like to now invite Ruslan Kavatsiuk, Deputy CEO of the Babi Yar Holocaust Memorial Center, to share his presentation.
Hello, everyone. I will. Do you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So let me start. I will share with you some slides briefly, some slides in more details. There's a big team working in Babi Yar Holocaust Memorial Center, working to deliver the idea and to commemorate the victims. And let me tell you briefly about how we're approaching that and how we do it. So if you look at Kiev back in 1941, you would see that the red part of it was on the outskirts of the city, the Babi Yar. Now it is basically inside the city. This is a place where the history was erased. The place now does not remind you at all about what it was. Soviet Union completely erased the landscape and built over it. If we put the landscape of the city back then, this is where the shooting locations were, and the circle is where we expect to build the main building of the Holocaust Memorial Center. Currently, it's a flat park area. Only 2 days, as you might know, 2 days after the shootings, German photographer, Wehrmacht photographer, Johannes Höhle, was in Kiev, and he made pictures with his camera of how the place looked back then. These are the only visual testimonies that vividly bring us to victims. Mainly, as you might see, these were women and children who stayed in the city when Germans came in. The photographer took quite a part of his time to spend time in Babi Yar. Almost most of his pictures in Kiev were made here. This is the western spur of Babi Yar, and you see how prisoners of war are covering bodies of victims with sand. Sovetski camp was right next to this place, and you can see how the landscape changed after the shooting. Holocaust in Eastern Europe happened mainly like in Babi Yar, and we consider Babi Yar a symbol of Holocaust by bullets. But first of all, it's a story of people who died there, and they were different, but we want to honor and remember each of them. We would like to build the memorial in a way that is a polyphonic story about Babi Yar, telling every story that we can. If you look at the execution site, that it was in 1941-43, you can see the western spur over here. This is the place of first 2 days of mass shootings. And there's another ravine right next to it, Babi Yar, known from Bailey's case, as you might know from the early 20th century. The psychiatric hospital where patients of the psychiatric hospital were killed. You might know that these ravines were the edge of the city, and that's where most of cemeteries were. Jewish, Orthodox, Karaite, Muslim. And the Sirez concentration camps for prisoners of war was right next to it. That's why Germans used Soviet soldiers to do all the work. You know that after the mass shootings, how Soviet Union tried to erase the memory, which led to Koronivska tragedy in 1961, which killed lots of people in Kiev. So altogether, this is a place of a memory. When we consider what we do, we consider to have different locations and spaces built in this area. The Museum of Babi Yar tragedy, the Holocaust Museum in Ukraine and Eastern Europe, Museum of History of the Site and the Koronivska mudslide, and the Museum of the History of Oblivion of the Babi Yar tragedy in Soviet times. We're going to have a number of installations that would commemorate names of the victims, space for prayers, scientific and education center, library and archive, educational space for kids, and center for rehabilitation for psychological trauma. When we approach the architecture in this place, there are a number of principles developed by our architecture board. We consider that the building should not disturb the ground that is sacred in this place. Natural elements will be used as a primary building materials. We will want to build a historical form that will lead to immersive experience, and visitors will be building their own personal narrative as they have their journey through the location of the memorial. We will use some old buildings that exist there since before the war and since the Soviet times. We'll consider building them in a way that they could be replaced, enhanced, or upgraded with new technology with time. We want to create systems that can be extended or reduced and scaled up or down, and reorganized in order to deliver a new meaning. If you look at the ravine, we want to build a number of spaces with time, having, so to say, a principle of journey where a person can travel between those museums and artistic objects and have their own journey, and a principle of stops during this journey. There is a clear principle how we plan all of those objects in the area so that people could have unique experience there. Of course, we want to link digital devices of visitors and create a unique navigation system, because it's quite a vast area of 150 hectares. We're looking at different examples of the way we can frame the location, because the landscape partially was erased, but there is a part of the ravine that survived Soviet times, and this is the only artifact left. We're going to build installation spaces with archive and historic materials. We already collected quite impressive number of artifacts of Jewish life all over Eastern Europe. We have quite a significant amount of visual and documentary materials of the time. Quite often we have more details about what is there on the picture, who these people are. Like in this picture, these people who were hanged, two of them were part of the shooting group in Babi Yar. I would like to show you a piece of video that will be presented in Cannes Festival in less than a month by Serhiy Loznitsa, Ukrainian filmmaker. Sorry for the slow connection.
Нам нужно собирать еврейское население и расстреливать его. Население стояло окружённо густой цепью полицейских и ожидало свою судьбу. Ее жалкие, истощенные руки были в пути, и она что-то кричала. Что она кричала, я не знаю. Она кричала по-еврейски. Их подводили близко к яму. Mussten sich mit dem Gesichtsausdruck aufstellen. Должны были стать лицом к нам. Und wurden so erschossen. И таким образом были расстреляны.
So there are many ways to build on unique video documentary that we have, and to reconstruct domestic life of people who lived in 1941 and later. Use it in different ways as we look at building a new memorial. This place you might know, the menorah, where from 1991 people prayed for the victims, and only a month ago a new Symbolic Synagogue was opened there by Manuel Herz, a Swiss architect, together with Ukrainian engineers, built it in Babi Yar. It's a synagogue in the form of a book that is 12 meters high, and it is right next to the menorah. When you visit, if you visit Kiev next time, it will be a pleasure for any of our team to deliver your personal tour in the ravine. We're very glad and proud to be part of such a prominent project to finally create a memorial in a place that almost 80 years is a place of crime that was never properly commemorated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruslan. And I'd like to invite Natan back for question and answer. And Ruslan, our first question actually is for you, and it comes from Glenn Morgan and Delray Beach, who asks, how is the history of Babi Yar reflected in Ukrainian textbooks and taught in schools, and how will that complement the work of the center?
The history of Babi Yar is part of schools' curricular for years. And Holocaust, of course, as well. We want to actually complement this with additional national lessons that will be proposed for teachers and students this September. And we actually have created and finalizing work with educational platform that allows children and teachers work with digital technology and basically smartphones of every person to learn the story of Babi Yar and learn it in a way that would actually speak with a modern language. I could actually take a couple of minutes and show you one of the examples how we do it. If we have time, you might ask Natan next question and I will download it and show you in a minute.
Our next question is for you, Natan. Many people, including Karen Rosen on Zoom, are asking, can you speak to your role as chairman of the board? How did you decide to be part of this important project? And how do you hope to connect and educate others on the importance of this history? And in particular, what type of outreach are you doing specifically with people who have left the former Soviet Union and know so little of these times?
Well, first of all, unfortunately, not only those who left Soviet Union know so little. It's true that we were deprived to know Holocaust, but young generation in general knows very little. And that's why one of the challenges is not only how to collect the archives, and there is tremendous work done to restore the names, new names and their stories and their family connections and where their relatives are now. But not only to find the documents of the crime, there is, unfortunately, technology didn't permit to see this awful but very powerful evidence of the pogrom in Lvov, terrible, or persecution of Jews in different parts of Ukraine, but also to find technological ways to make it exciting, interesting for the young. And here I have to say that the work of the team was very creative. We, of course, international board, we can give the support, we can share our experience, we look for the right messages to reach the public, but how to turn it into the technology, the language which makes for young people to be interested in this, to feel themselves part of the story, to feel solidarity with those young boys and girls whose life was finished there. That's a real challenge, and I have to say that this very young team of Jews and non-Jews from Ukraine and from Europe, from all over the world, specialists, very creative in architecture, but also in the high tech and technologies, how they're proposing their ways of, in fact, because of Corona, of course, we had to slow down our work on the surface, and there are two very exciting projects which are implemented. One is the synagogue, which you just saw, and you have to understand it's the first time that there was a synagogue after 1941, and it's unique architectural project, opening and closing book, but it's also very powerful fact of prayer. Now, today there is minyan every day in Babi Yar. And the second was installation, which also there is a very exciting symbolic installation, which reminds the days and reminds the names of those people. But all the other projects, in fact, are developing very slowly because of Corona. But at the same time, through internet, these many projects were through internet permitted to reach already hundreds of thousands and potentially millions. And judging from the first interest and from already now showed no doubt that tens of millions of the people will be reached with this project.
I can share one of the examples. I sent the link in the Q&A chat, but if I may share the screen, this is an example of the project that can work for youth, young people, younger generation. When people are part of certain path where they make a choice similar to someone who actually was living in 1941, and then they get to know the story of these people. When you make a choice and then you learn the story.
Thank you for sharing that. We've received a number of questions on Zoom, including from Marty Levinson, asking if there will be a registry of names for those who perished at Babi Yar.
We have it on our website, and I can share a link in the Q&A right now.
Our next question.
It is important only to add that only in the last year, our people working on the project brought almost 1,000 new names, which were not known until now. And hopefully now that for the first time there is systematic search and all the local archives are opened and many things are compared, hopefully in the end we'll have more or less all the names of the victims and their relatives and with all the possible information.
Our next question comes from Bob Cohen in San Francisco, who asks for you, Natan. During the last 20 to 25 years, there were other attempts to memorialize Babi Yar. There were competing and ambitious projects and concepts. Many of them ended with a fiasco. What's the main difference now? What makes this project special? And how can you be confident that this project will eventually be fulfilled?
Well, this time, from the very beginning, there is full cooperation of the local authorities. The mayor of the city, in fact, is one of the founders of the project. There is growing cooperation with the political level. As I said, the president and all his apparatus are personally involved in working on this project. And what is the last but not the least and very important thing, that there is a number of very powerful philanthropists who Ukrainian, some of them are from Ukraine, some of them are from Russia, but they are relative.
Natan, you are muted.
I'm sorry. So at this moment, until this stage, this project is fully financed by private sources. And the fact that it is financially economical, independent, that it has support or cooperation of local authorities, And it has also, I have to say, we have a very powerful or very influential international board that makes this project very different. And that's what gave us opportunity, cooperating with the government, to go to the best specialists in their fields and have this young but very talented group of people working. And that's what helps us to plan financing of this project for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. At some moment, of course, we'll be very happy if Ukrainian government will be involved financially. But at this moment, it's very important that this project can, which is, of course, is a very expensive project, can be developed without being dependent on one or another political force, but fully financed by private sources.
Thank you. Our last question is for both of you, and it's from Carl Reinstein in New York, who asks, in 5 or 10 years, what do you hope the center will have accomplished in terms of honoring the memory of Babi Yar?
First of all, I hope it will not be only the center of memory of Babi Yar and of 1.5 million Jews killed in Eastern Europe by bullets, in the Yars, in Ukraine and Belarus, in Rostov, in Russia, in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Romania, Bulgaria, and other places. But it also will be the center, research center, the center for studies, center for dialogue with the young generation of the Europe. Judging from all, we have a chance to have the place which will be one of the most attractive, not in the attractive in terms of the character, but attractive in terms of bringing people from all over the world, definitely from Eastern Europe, to think about how together we can build our future based on recognizing our past.
It's hard to add anything after Natan's said. I only hope that for not only Eastern Europe, but we consider globally, we would like to tell the story of Babi Yar, of Holocaust by bullets. We would like to tell this story in a way so that every person who comes there from any continent would feel that it's their story of what happened in Latin America, in Asia, everywhere, where similar things happen when people consider they can do what Germans did in Kiev. And we believe that the story of Holocaust in Babi Yar is important to tell because it was completely erased, as Natan said, from the memory of people, and it's not so far from us as it seems, and it's important to tell it so that the victims, those people who died, they did not die in vain, so that humanity learns this lesson.
Thank you, Ruslan, for joining us today and sharing this important information about the Memorial Center and Museum. Natan, I'd like to conclude remarks starting with you, and then we'll turn to David Harris. So please offer us your concluding remarks.
Well, then I want to say that, David is one of that army of students and housewives of American Jewry who fought for our freedom, and Soviet Union was defeated only because we Soviet Jews discovered our identity, went back to our roots, and American Jews rediscovered their identity. And this feeling of mutual history and one family, that would release this unique energy that destroyed Soviet Union, brought freedom to millions of Jews, and all the world is a different place. So returning back to our identity, restoring our history and our feeling of mutual history and mutual family, that is the way not only to continue our path through history, but that's the way of our tikkun olam, of making the world a better place. And now there is such a big debate how we Jews participate in this unique movement of social justice, of bringing justice to everybody. I want to remind everybody again and again, we can improve the world, we can help to everybody only if we are strong in our identity, in our memory, in our roots. Thank you.
Babi Yar has, for me, for decades been very much part of my own sort of historical consciousness. And it's not by accident that in my very first year as the CEO of American Jewish Committee, my first full year in 1991, that the keynote speaker that we invited to our global forum that year was actually Yevgeny Aftershenko, because I felt it was important that we honor him on the 50th anniversary of Babi Yar. And he spoke in Russian. And the very first words that he spoke to our large gathering of AJC members were the first words of his poem, Babi Yar, which in English read, "No monument stands over Babi Yar, a steep cliff, only like the rudest headstone. I am afraid. Today, I am as old as the entire Jewish race itself." 33,771 Jews, we're told, were rounded up and murdered in what was viewed as a record for mass murder in less than 2 days on September 29th, September 30th, 1941, in that infamous ravine now that we know as Babi Yar. And I am enormously both admiring and grateful, first and foremost to you, Natan, for taking over the chairmanship of this project. It's long in coming. Some would say it's late. It's been fraught with lots of issues, as you yourself said. But as you defeated the Soviet Union in your 9 years as their prisoner, but ultimately prevailed victorious, so you have helped drive this project to what will be a successful conclusion for the purposes that you and Ruslan described to us. And I just want to end with one comment motivated by what Natan said earlier. I'm a product of the Soviet Jewry movement. It shaped my life perhaps more than anything else. And we won. We won because of indomitable figures like Natan, and because of thousands and millions of people who understood what was at stake. I saw with my own eyes what Jewish unity can achieve. Today, as we face surging anti-Semitism, not to mention anti-Zionism, and as we saw as recently as last month, the vilification, demonization of the state of Israel, I once again yearn for that Jewish unity in understanding that if we stand together for core fundamental principles, we can climb mountains, we can move mountains. We did in the 1970s and 80s, we can do it again. It requires unity. And people like Natan Sharansky, for me, have always been the unifying force. So thank you, AJC. Thank you, Natan. Thank you, Ruslan, for this very, very special session on the eve of the 80th anniversary of the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union and all that ensued, including, tragically, what we've now witnessed at Babi Yar.
Thank you, David, and thank you, AJC, for the great work which you are doing on behalf of our people in the United States and globally, all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, David, Natan, and Ruslan, for this powerful conversation and for your work preserving this history for generations to come. I'd also like to thank our global audience for joining us today. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.